This is a part D from your paper 3, which is your Hinduism paper. And as a part D, just to remind you of our exam structure, we're advising you to do 2 main paragraphs, and in each paragraph you're going to give an initial answer or response to the statement. You're going to give 2 pieces of evidence to back it up, so that's your A, B, B. You're going to challenge that view, and then you're going to make some kind of decision about whether you are more convinced by the counter-argument or the original views. If possible, when you're giving your evidence, you're going to refer to sources of wisdom, but remember that sources of wisdom, as well as being scriptures, so things like the Vedas or the Bhagavad Gita, sources of wisdom can also be people like Gandhi. This is a useful part D to look at because on the religions papers, often it will have a statement and say something like all Hindus should do this, or all Christians should do this, or for Hindus this is the most important belief or practice. And when a question is phrased like that, the most able candidates are going to give different Hindu responses. They're probably not going to refer to responses from non-religious people or people of another religion, and that can be quite challenging to do. But that's the approach that I have taken with this answer. So to remind you, you have 2 A, B, B, C, D paragraphs. Answer, back up your answer twice, challenge it, and then make a decision. And then at the end, if you have time, but if you don't, it's not too much of a problem because you've got a decision here and at the end of your second paragraph. But if you have time, you would have a conclusion in which you would return to the original statement. If you have time for a conclusion, that can be quite a good way of just pulling yourself back on track if you've lost your way from the original statement. But as I say with all questions, as you're writing, keep an eye on the time. When you get to your 15 minutes, you really want to be moving on to the next section. On the Hinduism paper, there are also no spelling marks. Probably comes as something of a relief to you. So I'm going to talk you through my suggested answer. It's not the only one. I have typed this up really quickly in 15 minutes, so it's to time. It looks like it's massive because it's in a size 18 font, but it's not quite as long as it looks. You're also going to have to be patient with me because, of course, I'm going to pronounce all these Hindu key terms with my lovely Blackpool accent, so I apologise for that in advance. So, my first response to this statement is that many Hindus would agree with this quote, particularly if they felt inspired by Gandhi. And if you can take that response where you identify which group would agree or disagree, that's a good way to start a question. And so then my first back it up, if you like, is the fact that within Hinduism, Ahimsa is considered a virtue and is often quoted as being the most important virtue, and therefore that suggests that it is something that all Hindus should practice. Virtue would count as a really good key term there. Then my second back it up, and I'm quite conscious of the fact that I haven't really got a source of wisdom here, and so I'm going to try and address that a bit later on. But my second point, I'm going to use Gandhi, who does count as a source of wisdom, and I'm going to say that Gandhi would definitely agree that all Hindus should practice Ahimsa, and how he used non-violence or non-harm as part of his toolkit, if you like, to help the Indian people gain independence. Okay, so in this one, I have definitely got my source of wisdom, which is Gandhi. And so as you're putting your paragraphs together, I would like you in the exam, if possible, to be thinking to yourself, have I got sources of wisdom? Have I got key terms? Now I'm going in with my challenge because this is highlighted pink, and then I'm going to say that, you know, whilst Gandhi's ideas sound great, not everybody agreed. And my bit of evidence for that is the fact that in the Second World War, millions of Indians chose to fight, and many of those would have been Hindus. And so not all Hindus thought that it was always wrong to use violence. And then I'm going to go in and make my decision, and I'm still quite conscious of the fact my answer is quite light on sources of wisdom, and so I'm going to refer to the Bhagavad Gita, and that in that story between Arjuna and Krishna, Krishna does tell Arjuna that there are times when it is right to fight, that is the correct thing to do. That means, therefore, that as a whole, this section has got Gandhi as a source of wisdom and it's got the Bhagavad Gita, so I can move on quite happy. Then I'm going to go to my second section, and I'm going to say that a Hindu from the Kshatriya Varna, so I've narrowed it down to what sort of Hindus I'm talking about, would not agree with that statement, because they would say that there are times when they have to use violence to protect society. And so now I've got my source of wisdom. This is the poem of the Cosmic Man, the Purusha Sukta, which is one of the oldest, most respected scriptures. I'm showing off my subject knowledge there. And in that poem, it talks about the fact that the Varnas date back, if you like, to the first man. So that suggests that there has always been a group of Hindus that have a particular duty, or I could have used the word dharma there, to protect society. And there will be times when you need to use violence to do that. I have just spotted a typo in there that I am correcting. Then my second bit of evidence, my next source of wisdom, is going to come from the laws of Manu. And in the laws of Manu, it basically says that kings have the right, sometimes informed by Brahmins, but kings have the final say when it comes to giving out punishments. And they have to give out a punishment that keeps society safe. And that can include physical punishments and even the death penalty. And so again, that will mean that there will be times when particular Hindus cannot follow the principle of Ahimsa. Okay, and so note how I'm linking back to our question, which is all Hindus should practice Ahimsa. Then I'm going to challenge that, and I'm going to challenge it with Gandhi. And I'm thinking to myself, I've already used Gandhi here, and so I'm going to use a quote from Gandhi that most of you will know, which is an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. And Gandhi would say that when you use these physical punishments, you're just encouraging retribution, which would count as a key term, and you're just increasing the violence in society. That's a really, really good counter argument, because I'm referring to Gandhi, who is a source of wisdom. I've got an actual quote from Gandhi that's quite easy to remember, and I've got key terms in there like retribution. And then I'm going to respond. I'm going to give my decision. And so this is where I'm asking myself, do I agree with the counter argument or the original view? And I'm going to agree with the original view, and I'm going to say that whilst non-violence sounds like a good idea, there will be times when it's necessary for soldiers in particular to harm others. And look at how I've linked back to the original statement. I've said, therefore, I don't think that Ahimsa should be practiced by all Hindus at all times. That should read there. And that links back with that original statement here. So then I have got my conclusion, and I'm letting the examiner know that I've not only presented views, but I've looked at strengths and weaknesses, because that's evaluation and analysis. So I begin my conclusion by reminding the examiner what I have done and why I deserve to go in the top band. So having looked at the strengths and weaknesses of different views, I do not fully agree with the statement. And I'm going to say basically that whilst many Hindus should follow the principle of Ahimsa, there are certain Hindus at certain times for whom, for the greater good, it's going to be appropriate to use physical force or violence. And then my last sentence gives me an opportunity to link back to the original statement, because I end by saying, therefore I would say that most Hindus should practice Ahimsa rather than all, which matches the statement here. So just to remind you, in a part D, you have two A, B, B, C, D paragraphs: answer, back it up twice, challenge, and then decide. This decide is really, really important, because if your exam answer just looks like two part C's sandwiched together, you're going to be capped at about half marks roughly. There has to be counter arguments, and there has to be really you making a decision about what is or is not convincing. Use little linking statements so that you keep returning back to the original statement. So the original statement was all Hindus should practice Ahimsa. The word Ahimsa appears in every section of my argument. At the end of my first paragraph, I return to the statement and say, therefore, not all Hindus should or will practice Ahimsa. If I look at the end of my second paragraph, I don't think that Ahimsa should be practiced by all Hindus at all times. And then at the end of my conclusion, I would say that most Hindus should practice Ahimsa rather than all. If it's a question, or a statement rather, that begins with all Hindus or all Christians for paper 2, you want to give the views of different Hindus or Christians rather than giving the view of non-religious people.